Welcome. In this video I'm showing you how I made my tilting and rotating workbench, which I use primarily for carving. This is a simple project using minimal joinery. I'm just basically screwing everything together. The basic structure was from 4x2s cut down. The height of the bench was set to what I found to be a comfortable height for carving for me. This will vary from person to person, and it's worth experimenting to find a comfortable height so that you can carve for periods of time without getting backache or neckache. So the basic structure comprises two sets of legs which are just screwed together, as you can see here. I'm using the speed square to set the height of the stretcher as well as making sure it is square, and I'm screwing it in from both sides as the screws are a little bit on the short side. The top part of the leg assembly is horizontal to give a wider surface to fix the strap hinge to in due course. Again, this is just simply screwed together. I then joined the two leg assemblies with a cross stretcher, which is just clamped in place to start with to set the distance. Again, this is just screwed in place. I was checking this regularly to make sure it all stayed square. I did one long screw into each corner, which actually goes through all three pieces just to help stiffen this up a little bit more. Next job was to attach the strap hinges. In retrospect, it might have been better to have the long part of the hinge on the leg side rather than on the bench side, so they're out of the way of work potential positions for dog holes. However, I haven't changed these as round as yet. Added a piece of ply on the back to help stiffen the structure. This is just simply screwed in, as you can see. piece of ply was used to attach the workbench top to the hinges. So this is sort of a sub-top, if you like, as there will be another layer on top of this. I marked the centre so I could attach the Lazy Susan centrally. This Lazy Susan I bought from eBay. It's a good quality one. There are a lot of cheap ones made out of pressed steel that are a bit flimsy and wobbly. This has no play in it whatsoever, and the track is full of ball bearings all the way around, so it's a nicely made one. The central part of this ply is not needed, so I marked it out with a pencil so I could decide where to cut with the jigsaw. I drew a circle of where I was going to cut, and a bit later on I actually enlarged this a bit more, as there's no need for any ply in the centre of the Lazy Susan. But this was simply jigsawed out, as you can see. This was then attached to the strap hinges. And that's the tilting mechanism. I will make some supports to hold it in different positions in due course. This hole is to allow access to screw the Lazy Susan up into what will be the actual top of the workbench. This Lazy Susan has 3 holes for each side of the bearings. This is the worktop going on, which is a bit of beach kitchen work surface. As it turns out, this is the fiddliest part of the whole process, attaching the worktop to the Lazy Susan from underneath. The first screw is easy because you can clamp it in place, then you have to rotate it to get the next one in, and until it gets 2 screws in, it is not very sturdy at all, as you will see. So there we have it, it's already sort of slipped off its positioning. So it's a case of putting it back to where it was. Think about it, the sensible thing would have been to make 3 holes over the Lazy Susan hole so that you can just screw it all in one go, rather than just having the one hole and having to rotate it to get to it. But in retrospect, it's easy to notice these things. At the time, I just thought one hole would be enough. I managed to not get this in shot, but that's the last screw going in. There we can see we have a workbench that rotates freely and hinges up. So it's just now a case of making devices to control this. Also decided to put a shelf in the bottom using some of the other work surface that was left over. I'm going to use this to stack on some blanks and other things to help add extra weight to the bench. The more weight the better really, because it'll help to resist it being moved in use. Next I worked on the arms which will be used to hold it in different positions of tilt. I rounded the ends so that these can rotate freely around a pivot point. And then it's a case of marking out positions to have the supports lock in. So I made these every 10 centimeters, put a mark in, and drilled out using a Forstner bit. The holes were then angled on one side to make it easy for these to slip onto a support and hold its position there. So these are all marked off with the same angle. I then used the bandsaw to trim these off. And once this was done, it's a case of making a second one, the same for the other side of the workbench. I made some simple brackets for the supports to go against. So it's just a sort of semicircle of ply, and I attached this to a small rectangular ply at 90 degrees, as we can see here. These were then fixed to the underside so that they were out of the way when the bench went down flat. To start with, I just used a screw to hold this in place so I could adjust it easily. And there's also a screw on the side of the workbench for the arm to rest in. This was just to allow easy adjustment. I later on put a wooden dowel in on either side. I did a little bit of fiddling around to get the position right. It's then the case of reattaching the top, and yes, that's what happens when you've only got one screw in there. Bit of a disaster, so it's a case of redoing it. As I said earlier, that is the most frustrating and hardest part of it all. So I then reattached the arms using nuts and bolts rather than screws. Once I decided on the position, and I put a dowel in for this to rest in. This was just a dowel fitted into a hole drilled in the side. Use a couple of small ply pads at the end of the leg assembly, as you can see here, just so when the bench top comes down, it sits flat. At this stage I was doing some marking out for dog holes and where to put the fixings or the holes for holding the position, the rotation position. Obviously you have to be a bit careful that you avoid the Lazy Susan when you're drilling through holes from the top. So I'm now drilling a hole down to, these holes are for locking the rotation in different positions, so the whole series of holes going around, I just eyeballed this, didn't follow any set amount of rotation, just did what I thought looked about right. So there's as you can see, lots of holes where, and the idea is the bench can be fixed in any of these positions using a dowel from the top. I used a tapering bit to enlarge the hole at the top, and then a dowel that has a taper in it as well, and as you can see, that can sort of lock in. I then used one of the holes I drilled going up into the workbench, so that I had several different holes that I could use a dowel in to lock it in place. Hopefully this gives enough options so that when there's a workpiece on the top, there'll be at least one or more holes available to put the dowel into. Again, this is the view of the tapering bit, just making the hole a little bit larger at the top. A taper is a very good shape for locking things together, but a small tap and it comes free very easily. However, you could just use a plain dowel or a bolt, but I like the idea of a wooden dowel so that you try and keep as much metal off the workbench as possible when using chisels and things, so that they much less chance of them dinging the surface against a metal fixing. I then drilled a series of holes that'll take bench dogs, and the one in the centre potentially, or any of them potentially, can also be used with a carving screw to hold things. So here we are trying out the hole positions with some bench dogs, well, and adjustable bench dogs. Here we can see it's relatively easy to rotate the bench when it's up, as well as to bring it up into different positions. I did think I might need to clamp the arms that support the tilt in place, but I've found so far just using gravity with these is fine. They've not slipped off or caused any problems so far. But they could be held in place with a nut of some sort, have it so that it screws in, or just a simple quick clamp. But as I say, so far so good, not found it necessary. I did go and add a little bit of ply bracing around the top of the leg assembly, which you can see in this final clip that's coming up here, the curved bit at the front and two bits at the side, just to help give a little bit of extra rigidity. But all in all, it seems so far working out well. I may well add some additional dog holes, because it always seems to be that there's not necessarily one exactly where you need it, but there's plenty of scope to add in more. But I hope this has been useful to you. If it has, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.